Hello, this is Hollisa Alewine. Welcome to our last installment here on More Than a Scarf. So we've made it through some good material up until now. And at this point, to kind of close us out, I would like to take us back to some material from Creation Gospel Workbook 3, which is the Spirit-Filled Family. I just want to look at a paradigm. I want to go all the way back. You know how I am. Creation is my thing. I just like to go back into the creation, and let's look at the paradigm with the male and the female. Since in the last program we looked at the different types of head covers that a male or a female should wear. Obviously, a male should wear a male head cover. It's going to be, in the temple, it was more of a turban. It was more of a round, definitely male head cover. But with the female, it's more of a flowing, feminine. It fits who we are. And that's the thing to remember, ladies. If you do decide to wear a head cover at some point, you don't really have to look like you just finished helping Cinderella clean the floor. All right? I mean, you don't have to look like the scrubber lady. He made women in his image as well. If we were taken out of the man, if the man's in his image, then, think of, he says, Solomon in all his beauty was not arrayed like one of these flowers. So it tells you that Solomon liked to dress. And if we were taken out of the man, then it's okay if you like to dress up. The main thing is modesty. Modesty. When we dress, definitely we want to be attractive to our husbands. Just same way we want our husbands to be attractive to us, we want to be attracted to them. We don't, have to look like we've been scrubbing floors. It's fine if you want to wear nice clothes. Definitely you want to wear neat clothes. Just like men shouldn't have wild hair in the temple, we shouldn't look like wild people. We should look, what's the military term? We should look buttoned up. Right? Because we do serve the King of Kings. We do serve the Lord of Armies. If we have those identities, then we never want to give the message that he's chaos, because people look at us and say, well, who is this one that you serve? Well, he's not chaos. He's very buttoned up. He's the most buttoned up of anyone. And so, but it doesn't mean that modesty means, looking ugly. That's not what it means. It means not drawing undue attraction. If men are going to look and you're dressed modestly, that's not your problem. That's his. He's definitely got issues. Yeshua says he's got an adulterous heart. He's already committed in his heart. But if you're dressed modestly, and that means not drawing undue attraction to your sexuality. You don't want to wear tight-fitting clothes, around your bum. You don't want to wear tight-fitting clothes around your chest. But you can wear attractive clothes. You don't want to show a lot of skin. The old adage that we came up with years ago. We just said, let's base it on the sacrifices. We're told that there's certain parts of the sacrifice that belong to the Holy One. They're not for public consumption. So the breast, the thigh, and the fatty tail, those belong to the one who made you. Those are not for public consumption. And so those sorts of things, definitely. Now, is it okay if a lady wears pants? Why not if they're women's pants? Why not if they're not fitting to you like a skin? Nowadays lady wears leggings like they think they're pants, but that's not really what those are for. Those are to be worn under something. It's always good if you can, in mixed company, if you can cover what we call the junction, so that you're not drawing attention to your bum, that you're not drawing attention to places where you would rather men not be thinking about, especially in public prayer and worship, which that's the context we looked at with Paul. praying and prophesying in the congregation. There's certain things that you might wear at home that you definitely wouldn't want to wear into the congregation because of what you're prophesying in the congregation. If you're drawing attention to yourself and your body, then there's kind of an idolization that's going on there, because instead of pointing people to the one who made you, pointing to his glory. Remember the head cover, it's about, you're going to restrain your own glory. The tsema, the veil, it means to restrain or to hold together. We're all born with a particular glory. Women, yes, we're glorious in the way that the Creator made us. Men are glorious in the way that they were created. But there's certain things that we can do in terms of modesty that shows restraint, so that we're not misdirecting the attention for the glory that goes to Adonai, to ourselves. We want to make sure that we're giving glory and attention to Him. So yes, dress nicely. Your taste, it's fine. Whatever your taste is, it's just fine, as long as it's modest. As long as it's not drawing attention to the contours of your body. Same thing, men. There's certain pants you can wear that just aren't drawing attention to the Holy One. So don't wear those pants. They may have fit 12 years ago, but if they don't fit this morning, don't put them on, right? Be very careful. Anytime we're exposing skin. In the Orthodox world, a good rule of thumb is actually a rule of collarbone. For ladies, the shirt or whatever you're wearing, the collarbone is kind of the boundary line. That don't wear anything lower than that. That might expose cleavage, right? Because it's one of those things. You want men's eyes right here if you're talking to them. You don't want them lower. Same thing with us ladies. If a man's going to talk to you, we want eye contact. We don't want it lower. Because if it starts going lower, we're not really raising our eyes in that prophetic sense. We're not thinking in terms of holiness. We have distractions. Same thing, with your legs. You can tell. Ladies, we know when we're dressing for men, and we know when we're dressing for the one who created us. We know. And for our young ladies, we might have to instruct them, or somebody who's coming in who really doesn't understand what modesty is or why it's important. We might have to instruct them lovingly and kindly. Don't always assume the worst motivations for the way somebody is dressing. They just may have never been instructed. It's one of those things you kind of pick up from your mom, ladies, isn't it? Mom tells you how you should sit and how you shouldn't sit and how you should interact with the opposite sex. And probably those lessons are still good. And they probably still need to be passed on. It doesn't mean we have to be ashamed of being women. Like I said, don't go into the Cinderella scrubbing the floor mode and think that that's holiness. It may be, it may not be. It's about having that ability to pray or prophesy, to minister the word in your congregation without people looking at you instead of the one who is working through you. That's just easy to remember. But let's look at this paradigm. Let's go to Genesis 1:27. It says, God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. So the question is it him or is it them? Yes. He created him in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Who's them? Well, them is him, because them were in him. So him is them too. We are both in the image of Elohim. It's just that women were pulled out of the man, pulled out of the side of the man. But it doesn't mean that we lost our image of Elohim. That's not what it means. And then in verse 28, it says God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. So it doesn't say that he told him to subdue and rule. It says he said to them. He gave them a blessing, and then he gave them an obligation to rule, to subdue. So in the beginning, before sin entered the world, this scepter of ruling the creation was given to them. Like we said in the last program, kind of going with what Paul was teaching the Corinthians. A man praying and prophesying in the congregation is reflecting the image of Elohim and the completely restored authority over the creation. But the woman is prophesying of the restoration of mankind to subdue and rule over the creation. That's the power that she needs on her head because of the angels. And then you put those two pictures together, you see both Elohim, his presence completely restored, everything completely under his authority and manifest, and then mankind also. And we'd have to qualify that, say the righteous, that Yeshua has said he will place in places of authority. But in the beginning, before we have sin, the ruling over the creation was given to them. Together they had to uphold the word of creation. But then a curse entered the world. So we say, well, what about the curse? Look at all these curses that were put on the woman. Doesn't that mean that she's inferior? Doesn't that mean that she just has no more voice? She's just there to serve and be ordered about? That's not really the message we're getting from Yeshua. In fact, why did he even come? Did he come to keep us under the curse? Or did he come to free us from the curse of sin and death? Because with the curse of sin and death came the curse on the woman and the man. Each had their unique little curse, or curses to deal with. So let's see how we've both dealt with our curses. The men were cursed to have to earn their food by the sweat of their brow. In other words, if you're going to eat, you're going to have to sweat. Do they still do that? Do they still sweat over every bite they put in their mouths? Do they sweat to sow and to reap? Not really. I mean, they might. It might be a hot day on the tractor. But aren't they under a curse? What right do they have to try to make that job easier by inventing tractors? Or let's go back. What right did they have to make that curse easier by inventing plowshares, hoes, rakes, cultivators? What right did they have by applying fertilizer to make their lives easier? Their curse was to earn their bread by the sweat of their brow. How dare they try to make that easy? But they did. They're not still digging in the earth with sticks for the most part to plant wheat. They've invented plows. There were harnesses before that. But now we have mechanized farm implements. Now we have all sorts of ways to get the food to the table without so much sweat, without just destroying a man's body, doing that hard work. There's easier ways to get the dairy cows doing what they do. There's easier ways now to get the beef cattle to do what they do, to get that stuff on the table. So if men didn't have to stay under that curse, if they're not still poking the ground with sticks to produce a bite of bread by the sweat of their brow, why are we trying to keep women under a curse? If it's possible as human beings to be more compassionate, to get closer to the way that things were in the beginning. I tell you what, I'm pretty sure if men had to do laundry, washers and dryers would have been invented much sooner. Probably so. That's a hard job. But Yeshua, I'm kidding, by the way. I don't know, maybe I'm not. I think they would have been invented sooner. But Yeshua took us back to the beginning. He took us back to before the curse entered in the world, because he didn't want to keep us under the curse. He came to begin to lift the consequences of the curse until the point that when he returns, there can be a complete restoration. In Matthew 19:4-8, it says, he answered and said, have you not read? That's about as aggravated as Yeshua gets, right? Have you not read that he who created them from the beginning, what are the first words of the Torah? In the beginning. In the beginning, from the beginning, he made them male and female, and said, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and shall be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. They're partners. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate. They said to him, why then did Moses command to give her a certificate of divorce and send her away? He said to them, because of the hardness of your heart, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives. But from the beginning, it has not been this way. So Yeshua acknowledges there's going to be times it doesn't work out. If it doesn't work out, sometimes the best you can do is give a certificate of divorce and part ways. But that's not the ideal. He says from the beginning, that was not the intention. The intention was for those two to be so close that they would just be one. And so trying to figure out, I think the question, the background behind it, if I'm not mistaken, is they're like, okay, this woman's first husband died, then her second husband died, and they say, okay, whose husband is she going to be in the kingdom? He's like, oh, you just completely missed it right here. But at least in his answer, we can see that Yeshua's heart is toward the beginning, toward the perfection, before the curse entered the world. Did men and women relate to one another differently before the curse entered the world? Surely they did. Surely they did. And Yeshua's not disputing that we're still in a fallen world. He doesn't say that we're not still under a curse. But that's not what he came to continue. That's what he came to begin the reparation. Nevertheless, he acknowledges Torah is going to acknowledge our fallen and our cursed condition. But if it's within our power not to just happily keep engaging in fallen and cursed behaviors, then why would we? If we don't have to, why would we? The ideal, Yeshua says, is back at the beginning. And so if we're going to learn from Yeshua's teaching, we're going to have to look beyond the reality of the present condition, which is what he was trying to get, the people around him to listen to. Yes, I know we have divorce. I know we have it. Sometimes it's necessary. But he says, that's not the kingdom I've come to establish. I want to establish a kingdom like it was at the beginning, before there's curses. Right now, we are at the mercy of sin. Right now, sometimes divorces are necessary. But often what we're at the mercy of is culture, tradition, politics, indoctrinations. And sometimes those things have a greater influence on us than the actual truth. And that's what Yeshua is telling us. Pay attention to the actual truth of why I came. I didn't come to keep you under the curse. I don't intend to rule my kingdom with you under a curse. Why keep practicing like you're cursed? Why keep doing cursed things? He didn't come so we could keep sinning. What does Paul say? God forbid. Just because he came to forgive your sin doesn't mean you keep on sinning. Well, if he came to free you from the curse and you can be free from cursed thinking and behavior, why would you keep on doing cursed things? He wants us to as much as possible within the boundaries that we live in, try to return to the beginning, and especially try to change our thinking back to beginning thinking. Because Yeshua was the word of creation. He was there in the beginning. If anybody knows about the beginning, it's Yeshua. To him, male and female are both him and them. They're two, but they're one. They're one, yet they're two. He didn't have any trouble with this. We have trouble with this. And so in ministry, I think this is what Paul was trying to tell us. When he just kept talking, when he could have just dropped it and made it look like he's talking about a hierarchical relationship between men and women, he keeps talking so we won't think that. He says, all things are from Adonai. Woman came out of man, man comes out of woman. The woman's not independent of the man's not independent of the woman. All things are from Elohim. Go back to the beginning. Beginning thinking before the curse comes in. So you've got this ministry pattern, male and female ruling as one, yet two. Two, yet one. And no, we don't live in a completely restored creation. Again, we've got all sorts of stumbling blocks to deal with. Again, sin is in the world. Culture's in the world. Traditions in the world. Politics are in the world. There's all sorts of other power structures in this world that are stumbling blocks to us. But the Spirit is striving to restore the beginning. The Holy Spirit is striving to restore these complementary roles of the male and the female. Listen to what Isaiah 51:1 says. Listen to me, you who pursue righteousness, who seek the Lord. Only if you're pursuing righteousness, no one else need apply. You who pursue righteousness, who seek the Lord, look to the rock from which you were hewn, and to the quarry from which you were dug. Rocks and quarries are the same thing. The quarry's made out of the rock. He says, look to Abraham, your father, and to Sarah, who gave birth to you in pain. When he was but one, I called him. Then I blessed him, and I multiplied him. See that curse? She had to give birth in pain. Will we always be under that curse? No. No. And he's hinting here, who is him? He says, when he was but one, I called him. But who is he talking about? Abraham and Sarah. He's talking about two people. But he says, when he was but one, I called him, and I blessed him, and I multiplied him. Two is one, and one is two. Here's the blessing. He says, I bless them. Okay, Genesis 12:15. Here is Sarah's blessing. As for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, my princess, but Sarah, everybody's princess, shall be her name. I will bless her, and indeed I will give you a son by her. Then I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of peoples will come from her. How is that different from this? Genesis 17:4. As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you will be the father of a multitude of nations. No longer shall your name be called Avram, but your name shall be called Abraham. For I have made you the father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings will come forth from you. Him, them, male and female. Is it singular? Is it plural? Both a male and a female, a mother and father, are needed to fulfill the prophecy of Israel's role among the nations. And it's going to be part of this promise of bringing the earth into the subjection once again to the rule of Elohim. He's just kind of stepped back and let us go, let us self-destruct. His touch is not so manifest in this world as it once was, but he will return, and all the world will know. Every knee will bow. Every tongue will confess. And this is the work of the Holy Spirit, because remember, in the beginning, it was the Ruach, it was the Holy Spirit that moved, it brooded over the creation to bring forth goodness in the earth. Well, if we're going to go back to that beginning, then we have to go back to the estate, the state and the estate of the way the garden was. Because from there will go the influence through the whole world. So Paul is telling us that a woman in prayer and prophecy is a powerful thing. She needs this power on her head because she's moving in a powerful way. She is proclaiming the word. It's a powerful force, and the armies of darkness know that. The armies of darkness know. The principalities and the powers know. Here's what it says in Psalm 68:11. It says, the Lord gives the command. The women who proclaim good news are a great army. Kings of armies flee, they flee. And she who remains at home will divide the spoils. That is a precious prophecy, ladies. The Lord gives the command. Remember what Paul says, all is from Elohim. And he says, the women who proclaim the good news. How would you proclaim the good news? You could just proclaim it. You could just tell somebody the gospel. You could just teach somebody the word. But in a congregation, which is Paul's context, you would do it through prayer. Prayers are typically prophetic in his experience because so much of it is scripture within Judaism. It's just repeating Adonai's word back to him. But through prayer and through prophecy, women are also proclaiming the good news. If they're moving in the gifts of the Spirit, they are proclaiming the good news. And he says they are a great army. You let these women pray and prophesy in your congregation with power on their heads. It says kings of armies flee. What kind of armies? Armies of darkness. Anything in the way, anything in Yeshua's way can be cleared out. When these women are walking in their gifts and their callings, it says kings of armies flee. It didn't just say they flee, it says they flee, they flee. And it says she who remains at home will divide the spoils. She who remains at home. Do you realize the story of Deborah is so much like this? Deborah goes up with the army to conquer the iron chariots of Sisera. But Yael remained at home. And Sisera just stumbled straight into her tent. And she killed him with the tent peg, like, gotcha. Doesn't matter what your role is, ladies, if you will be faithful. If you will pray and prophesy in the power of the Spirit. If you will proclaim the good news. You're going to be a powerful force, and kings of armies will run away from you. If you don't believe me, try this. Let's say you've got somebody obnoxious at work, just drives you nuts. Next time that obnoxious person comes to you, and you know they're about to do something obnoxious, just start preaching the word. Watch if that guy or gal doesn't flee. I mean, they will set a new world Olympic record getting down that hallway, getting out of your office. If you just start proclaiming the good news. The kings or the queens of darkness will flee. But what if the good news resonates? What if they're always expecting people to push back, people to try to avoid, and instead you start preaching the good news to them? It might strike a nerve. That might be exactly what they need to hear to start this transformation, to come to know Yeshua, who can deal with that obnoxious behavior. You don't know what will happen. Because again, ladies, in prayer and prophecy, when we proclaim the word of Adonai, the good news, we are a powerful force. And this is the whole idea of the head cover. He says, let her be covered, because it's a sign that there's a powerful force under this head cover. Look out, armies of darkness. Here she comes. And she's walking in the word. In Acts chapter 2, Peter gets this. He finally gets it. Remember when the women came to Peter and tried to tell him the good news of Messiah's resurrection? And it says it seemed to them as if they were speaking foolishness. They run to the disciples. He's alive. He's alive. He's not in the grave. He's alive. And Yeshua had been telling them this for how long? And they just don't get it. And so when the women come and they affirm, like, just like he said, he's not in the grave. He's risen. It's like, foolish women, baby mices, just telling stories. They're crazy. They're delusional. Oh, yeah? What did Yeshua have to say about that? When a woman proclaims the word, don't hear foolishness. That's lesson number 1 here. Because then Peter has to be the one to stand up and explain what's happening in Acts chapter 2. He is not confused at all at that point about what's happening. He's learned his lesson about making fun of the good news just because a woman delivers it. Apparently he's repented by the time we get to Acts chapter 2. Probably well before Acts chapter 1, because in Acts 1:14, it says, all these were continually devoting themselves with one mind. Hear the unity there? With one mind to prayer. What does Paul say? Prayer and prophecy. To prayer. It says, along with the women. And Miriam, the mother of Yeshua, with his brothers. His brothers were real skeptics up to this point. Miriam, his mother, is there, but it says along with the women and even his own mother. So now they're all praying together, and it says of one mind. Then, that's one scene. Now we go to Acts chapter 2, which most likely took place in Solomon's porch of the temple. Most likely. That's where they like to gather. And the house, remember, it's a euphemism for the temple. It would be really hard to baptize 3,000 people in an upper room, if you think about it. Or how could they even hear if they were still in the upper room? The house is the temple. So they've gathered there for Shavuot. Gathered there for Shavuot, just like Yeshua commanded them to do. And wonder of wonders, the women are praying with the men, it sounds like. And so the Spirit falls, and it says, we hear them speaking in our own tongues of the mighty deeds of God. What are they speaking about? What are these women doing? They're proclaiming the good news. It says, they all continued in amazement and great perplexity, saying to one another, what does this mean? What does this mean? Have you ever done that? I don't get it. What does this mean? What I'm seeing here is in conflict with everything I've been brought up to believe. What was it they were seeing that was in conflict with what they ever expected to see? We'll talk about it. It says, but others were jeering and saying, they are full of sweet wine. But Peter, taking his stand with the other 11, it wasn't just Peter saying this, all 12 of Yeshua's disciples are standing behind these words. It says, he raised his voice and declared to them, men of Judea and all you who live in Jerusalem know this. Pay attention to my words. For these people are not drunk, as you assume, since it's only the 3rd hour of the day. This is what has been spoken through the prophet Joel. And it shall be in the last days, God says, that I will pour out my Spirit on all mankind and on your sons and your daughters. Isn't that what Paul said? Everything is from Elohim, all mankind. He says your sons and your daughters will prophesy, just like Paul said. And your young men will see visions, and your old men will dream dreams. And even on my male and female servants, I will pour out my Spirit in those days, and they will prophesy. You see, up to this point, you got women getting a little bit. You got Sarah, you got Miriam, you've got Deborah, you've got Huldah. You're getting a little bit of pouring on the female servants. And now he says, I'm not going to hold back. Even on my male and female servants, I will pour out my Spirit in those days, and they will prophesy. What is it? Prophesy. What do you say? prophesy. What was Paul talking about? Praying and prophesying in the congregation. He says, I will display wonders in the sky above and signs on the earth below, blood, fire, and vapor of smoke. The sun will be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and the glorious day of the Lord comes. And it shall be that everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. All right. So seems like there's a disconnect right here. Even on my male and female servants, I will pour out my spirit in those days and they will prophesy. And then he goes into the signs and the wonders in the sky. Well, most of us, we say, well, that probably could have happened on a limited basis in the past, but we expect the full fulfillment of the blood, the fire, and the vapor of smoke, the sun, the moon, at the glorious day of the Lord, which is coming. So I wonder if this is why we have completely ignored what Peter is quoting right before here. In the last days. What are the last days? Well, it more from a rabbinic point of view, each 1,000 years is a day. And we are already in the days of Messiah. We actually entered into the days of Messiah about the time Messiah was born. These last 2 days are considered the days of Messiah. These last 2,000 years are considered the days of Messiah. These are the last days. Sometimes you have to know the context of where they're coming from. So because we haven't seen the signs and the wonders and the smoke and the blood and the fire, it seems like somehow we completely forgot about the daughters prophesying. That we completely forgot about the female servants praying in a fullness of the Spirit, right alongside their brothers and sisters in Messiah in the temple, proclaiming the good news, praying and prophesying, declaring the mighty deeds of Elohim, to the point that Peter's explanation is, that's it right there. This is the Spirit that Yoel prophesied. We've just entered into the last days. Unfortunately, for some folks, there came to be a disconnect. Let's go back to the full context, though, of what Joel says. In Joel 1:4, he says, what the gnawing locust has left, the swarming locust has eaten, and what the swarming locust has left, the creeping locust has eaten, and what the creepy locust has left, the stripping locust has eaten. He says, awake, you heavy drinkers, and weep, and wail, all you wine drinkers, because of the sweet wine, for it has been eliminated from your mouth. For a nation has invaded my land, mighty and without number. Its teeth are the teeth of a lion, and it has the jaws of a lioness. You realize he's describing here the iron beast kingdom of Rome, that unnameable monster that Daniel saw. It's this conglomeration of the beast kingdoms that have come before it. And so it's going to have the teeth of a lion and the jaws of a lioness. They're iron. Iron. Rome is the iron kingdom. It's the beast kingdom. And he's saying it's because you have become heavy drinkers. And what did those who were jeering say? They're all drunk. They're drunk with sweet wine. Exactly. Like Yoel said, Peter's speaking right to them. Daniel 7:7, it says, describing this beast, he says, after this I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible and extremely strong, and it had large iron teeth. It devoured and crushed and trampled down the remainder with its feet, and it was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. So those listening to Peter and those hearing this incredible move of the Spirit and witnessing the tongues of fire, that should have resonated with them. They knew the prophecies of Daniel. They knew the prophecies of Yoel. They knew that this particular phenomenon of prophecy was positioned with the iron jaws of Rome. And that Yoel says, you're dealing with these iron teeth of Rome because you're drunk. You're drunk with sin. You're in a spiritual sleep. You're mocking the holy things. And so Yoel goes on. Remember, they're jeering. Some of them are jeering. Some of them are saying, what must we do? What must we do? Some of them are jeering. So Joel goes on in 2:17. He says, let the priests, the Lord's ministers, weep between the porch and the altar. And let them say, spare your people, Lord, and do not make your inheritance a disgrace with the nations jeering at them. Why should those among the people say, where is their God? So Joel prophesies the jeering that even takes place right here in Acts chapter 2. And remember, these people are collected from among the nations at this point for Shavuot. You've got proselytes, people from all over. And who's going to intercede? He says, let the priests, the Lord's ministers, weep between the porch and the altar. What porch? We don't know exactly. Could have been Solomon's porch, where Yeshua's disciples liked to gather when he was teaching. But they're interceding. And I wonder if they weren't, in Acts chapter 2, if the men and the women weren't interceding with exactly these words. Spare your people, Lord, and do not make your inheritance a disgrace with the nations jeering at them. Why should those among the people say, where is their God? Who assembled? It says, let the priests do it. Well, the Levitical priests at this point are not all Levitical. There's been a lot of corruption, a lot of politics, a lot of buying of priestly offices, especially by the Sadducees. Are they really the priests anymore? The community at Qumran, the Essenes, they wouldn't even go to the temple anymore. They just made their own little community and said, we're not going until he raises up the qualified Levitical priests, which they also disappeared from history. But who did answer the call? A remnant of sons and daughters, male and female servants. They assembled at Shavuot to pray for the deliverance of Israel, to pray for the restoration from this iron beast of Rome that was about to just consume them and then scatter everybody into exile. It's prophetic, because we have this interceding remnant there about 40 years before the destruction of the temple. And then what happens? The Levitical priesthood is dissolved, sent into exile, and now what replaces it is a royal priesthood. A royal priesthood, like Yeshua, after the order of Melchizedek, a king of righteousness. And so now we have these little movable temples, and we are the sons and the daughters. And we want his Spirit to pour out on us, but we have to be willing to do exactly what they were doing in Acts chapter 2. We have to be intercessors. We have to pray. We have to be willing to speak forth the good news. We have to be willing to prophesy, and Torah is prophecy. And if you're speaking the word of Adonai, in a sense, you're prophesying. It may not be that specific gift of prophecy, but you are prophesying. And so Peter's saying we have just entered into the last days. Yeshua has begun to restore the sons and the daughters, just like he told Martha. Martha, Miriam wants to sit at my feet with my male disciples and study the word with me. And you want to serve. And both are good. But she's chosen the better thing. She's chosen to sit at my feet while I'm here, because she's going to have to proclaim this word. And I believe she was right there front and center in Acts chapter 2, proclaiming this word, because she had done everything she could to prepare herself to do it. In a time when women typically did not get to go to the synagogue and hear the Torah every Shabbat. Often what would happen is the men would listen to the lesson, and then they would go home and teach their wives and children. That was true in Middle Eastern Jewish communities, even to the early 1900s. That's the way that it worked. And so imagine her audacity at sitting at the feet of Yeshua and saying, I want to be a disciple. I want to know your word. I want to proclaim your word. I want to proclaim salvation. How can I proclaim salvation if I don't know you, if I don't know your word? And it's so unfortunate that since then, even though we can tell from the letters of Paul that women were a mighty force in that early believing community, he sends Phoebe to the Romans, probably to explain the book of Romans. If only Phoebe were around to explain the book of Romans to us now. I mean, wouldn't that clear up a lot of trouble on the Roman road? And he speaks of other women, like Junia. We hear of Priscilla. And, you know, in Scripture, a lot of times it'll put the primary person first. If we read about Priscilla and Aquila, in one context, we'll see Aquila and Priscilla, and then it'll be flipped, Priscilla and Aquila. It's showing an equality. Just like you'll hear, honor your father and mother, and then in the second context, it'll flip and say, honor your mother and father. It's showing their roles are both important. Don't honor one over the other. Honor them for their roles. And so with her husband, Priscilla was a mighty proclaimer. She was a mighty daughter of the word. Powerful. And so what happens to the church once the women are pushed to the back and behind the veil? What happens to the church? You know the answer to that question. So when righteous women are empowered, not by Elohim, because he's already empowered them, by the way. Yeshua has already empowered them, by the way. When culture and tradition and politics and jealousy and misunderstanding and suspicion, when those boundaries are taken away from a mighty woman who proclaims the good news, what do you think will happen to the assembly of Elohim? How powerful do you think the assembly of Elohim will become in the world? You know the answer to that too. So our eye is beautiful behind the veil. The veil is also a veil of modesty, right? You can't proclaim the word in a state of pride. You just can't. Those things don't coexist. But in humility, being willing to do whatever the Spirit calls you to do. We have to be willing to let our sons and our daughters walk in that purpose. We have to be willing to free the male and the female servants of Adonai. Just let them go free to proclaim the good news. So ladies, I know you got a lot of questions. We did a lot of discussion about this in our weekly Torah class. I got all kinds of interesting questions that I just, sometimes you work things out so long ago that you forget that there are people who still do have questions about the things that you work through. And so these are things, maybe ladies, you could get together with your sisters or your brothers. It doesn't matter, if you're going to discuss the word. Make some coffee and, some cookies or something more healthy. And just sit around and ask some questions of one another, or ask some questions of the word. Like, should a believer today, a lady, should she cover her hair at all times? That's a good question. Again, Paul, don't sign my name to it, but the way I see it today, Paul was acknowledging that cultures and custom can dictate, how we conduct ourselves out in public. But he says when you enter into the congregation, if you're going to do these two specific things, then ladies, please cover your head with something feminine. So I've seen, actually have a kippah, but it's very feminine. It's got, ribbons on it, and it's decorated with gold stuff. The main thing would be make sure, men, that you don't look like a woman And ladies, that you don't look like a man, that you're like, there's certain things like, okay, that's a dude, right? Don't cross those two things. If you're going to cover your hair, should you do it at all times? That's up to you. I don't teach that. But if you want to, go ahead. Some people have asked, is a talit considered a head cover? No, it is not. It's a privacy tent. That's your prayer closet, actually. It can also be a unity tent. You see that at Jewish marriages where the bride will come up under the talit with the bridegroom. That is not a head cover. That's a tent, much different. You wouldn't call your, if you went camping, you wouldn't say, well, I'm ready to go to bed. Let me go get under my head cover. Right? And it's also a prayer garment. Right? But you don't really want to confuse those two things. Some of them said, if I want to wear a head cover, should it take a certain form? Again, make sure it doesn't look male. But there's all kinds of stuff out there. There's stuff like this, like I like to wear, where I can wear my hair up inside it, or I can pull a ponytail out the back. It's not so heavy that way if you're prone to headaches. Some ladies like a snood, the nets, they're very lightweight. If you look at the Orthodox in Israel today, some of those ladies, they really do look like queens. They look like they've got big crowns on their heads. A hat. A lot of times I'll just wear a ball cap. I've got a couple of favorite ball caps. And if I'm going to study the Torah or teach or something, I'll just throw on a ball cap right quick. Again, ladies cut, right? If it's unisex, I don't have that big an issue with it. Some t-shirts are unisex, some hats are unisex. But if something looks particularly male, then I don't need to do that because I'm a girl. Somebody asked if I want to wear a head cover, but then I feel like it would draw attention to me. It will. It will, because you definitely want the powers and principalities to notice the power on your head. That's the whole deal. It's sending a signal, right? Just like when the astronaut puts on the spacesuit, it's a signal that he intends to get in the rocket and hopefully launch into outer space. If you're wearing the head cover in a congregation, then that should be a signal to anybody that I'm restraining my own glory because I want to draw attention to the glory of Elohim. I want this power on my head so that I can minister freely. And then other questions like, all right, in Judaism, a wife covers her head, but not until she's married. Now you're talking about a big train wreck of culture, tradition, and scripture. And so we'll save that for another time. All right? But I hope you've enjoyed the series. I've enjoyed teaching it, and I hope it gives you some good coffee table discussions in the future. So in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, pray and prophesy.